Hello and welcome to the Suzanne Atwell Show. In this episode, body cameras, transparency, law enforcement, and public trust. After years of study and deliberation, the Sarasota Police Department is putting body-worn cameras in the field. We'll talk to SPD Chief James Reeser and his new manager of body-worn cameras. Trevor Harvey, president of the Sarasota chapter of the NAACP, and Michael Barfield, Florida ACLU board president. But first, a brief overview.
Put your hand behind your back.
We are at a tipping point between technology, privacy, and accountability. For law enforcement, that means zero tolerance for error. To understand how we got here, we have to go back nearly 100 years. The first documented dash cam was in the 1930s, when a Washington, D.C. inventor debuted the windshield camera to help police catch traffic violators. The first documented use by law enforcement was in the late 60s by the Connecticut State Police. But in-car cameras were rare back then. That began to change in 1980 when Mothers Against Drunk Drivers was founded. They are credited with advancing the use of dash cams by purchasing systems for police that help detect and apprehend drivers under the influence. While body cam technology has been around since 1998, it was not until 2012 that Rialto, California police became the first in the nation to deploy department-wide. A study done on the impact in Rialto was remarkable. During the first 12 months, use of force by officers wearing cameras fell 59%, and complaints against officers dropped 87%. A recent article in The Economist quoted a University of Chicago study that found body cam use reduced misconduct complaints by 17%. 2014 was a watershed year for body cams. The location, Ferguson, Missouri. The event, the shooting murder of 18-year-old Michael Brown by a Ferguson police officer. Later that year, President Obama proposed the federal government reimburse localities for body-worn cameras. Grants were given to 73 agencies in 32 states. One of the cities was Sarasota. I was on the commission when we voted to buy 24 body cameras at a cost of $36,000. Unfortunately, despite support for the use of the cameras, fear of lawsuits and cost concerns led us to vote to delay. As of last month, only 7 states have mandated use of body-worn cameras. Florida is not one of them. The Florida Highway Patrol does not use body cams. Sarasota County sheriffs do not use body cams. Manatee County sheriffs do use them. Ditto for Bradenton and Northport. Notably, in terms of access, Florida law exempts from public record video obtained inside a private residence or any place a reasonable person would expect to be private, like a hospital or social service facility. Equal public access and fees for getting copies is a serious concern. So are questions about when the cameras are turned on and how long the video will be kept in the archives. It's complicated. We begin our search for answers with Sarasota Police Chief James Reeser.
Right now, we have about 122 cameras out there. Frankly, if you're not in the body camera business now, you're not looking forward. It means maximum transparency for our agency, and it's been an amazing journey. We were very, very fortunate that the If you look at the past, what occurred, you know, there were a lot of factors going on, and you were a commissioner at that time. You know, they were very, very expensive back in the day, and storage was very expensive. Now they're doing cloud-based storage, which has changed the game completely.
Why now? Why did it take Sarasota nearly 6 to 10 years to get moving on this?
Well, I can tell you the cost of it has it's changed exponentially, and it was storage. Storage, now we use the cloud, which is great, isn't it? That changed the cost of the cameras, the storage of the video. Also, the state of Florida, our privacy laws have changed here. So we now are on the right path to have this opportunity to have these cameras. So now is the time. And like I said before, if you're not in the business of body-worn cameras, if you're not thinking about it or trying to get the money to get it, you're really not thinking forward. It's so very important, not just for accountability. And I know that's the crux of everybody,
Sure.
and that's what the national narrative is. It's about accountability and, you know, making those police officers do what they're supposed to do. Well, I look at it another part of it, you know, the detective in me, the sergeant detective, the captain in the criminal investigations division, and the police officer, the ability to capture evidence like no other time before in an interview or a scene. That part is invaluable.
Well, and also we talk at length about police reform. We've got the world change with George Floyd,
Sure.
with Black Lives Matter. So this meets the criteria for how is this police reform? How is this affected by that?
See, this is exactly what the community wants. It's what I want. It's what the police officers that are wearing these cameras want each and every day. Who has the cameras? All of our patrol officers, our sergeants have them. Our traffic unit, our canine unit, our Marine Patrol, our HOT team and our CAT team unit, all the officers that are working the street, that are working with the community, answering calls for service, everyone has the body-worn camera. We put a detective in our internal affairs division. All that detective is doing, Detective Doug Vollmer, all he's doing is watching body camera video. That's it. He can make real-time decisions on training, policy revision, accountability. And here's another piece of this body cam that I don't think is really getting out there that it really should. You know, back in the day when I started in 1992, I went to a call for service. I went to a burglary. Somebody broke into a back window. Now, when the officer goes there, he has the ability to video where the entry point is, the evidence, an interview. It's all captured on video. And I have to tell you, if that's not an advantage, I don't know what is, you know. So I think it's going to help both the state attorney, the public defender's office, the police officers. It's going to help them when they write reports.
Sure.
They're going to be more accuracy.
To get into a little bit of somewhat the nuts and bolts, the standards of and expectations of when the camera gets turned off and on.
Right. So our policy, basically when the officers are investigating things.
Give me an example.
So an example would be, let's say they're at I'll give that example of a burglary and they have a suspect in custody. You know, they're supposed to, when they're interviewing that suspect, they have to turn the camera on. When they're documenting the scene, talking to witnesses, talking to the victim, that camera should be on. When they're talking maybe to their supervisor and they're saying, hey, look, this guy's really not telling us the truth here, they can turn the camera off at that point.
Privacy. And I know we may get into that later about, someone hears about a scenario that you just mentioned. Can I go down and get a copy of the camera?
Right,
tape?
and make a public records request, and you know.
Do they ask who I am? Why are you doing that? I'm not press, I am press, whatever.
I mean, we just started a whole program with the city, which is a great program. It's called Just FOIA. And you could go on the city website. You could actually call down to the police department. If you called Peter, our manager, or if you called our records division, Harley Bishop, and say, hey, I need a video for an accident or a burglary or a theft or whatever the case may be, it doesn't matter. And I need, we have attorneys that do that, the state attorney, the public defenders, insurance companies, and this Just FOIA is an actual computer program that the city just purchased and did training, and it'll be right up on the website, and you can go right in and you can go, hey, my name's Jim Reeser and I need the video from a burglary at 1665 Main Street, whatever it is. So
I go to the SPD website quite often. The mission is, quote, professional, dedicated police service in partnership with our community, end quote. So, how do body cams help achieve that mission?
Well, I think we are pushing towards maximum transparency. And isn't that what everybody wants? Don't they want, when you call the police, that someone shows up and they're into it. They're engaged. They are listening. They're hearing what you're saying. I tell everybody, I think the marching orders at the police department, and they're not just mine, they're the police officers that work at the police department for the city of Sarasota. We're all a big team. I want people to be treated like you would treat my family. Not just because I'm the chief of police, but because I'm a citizen here in the city of Sarasota. I live in the city of Sarasota. I think it's very important that people are treated with respect, with dignity. Unfortunately, this job is not always pretty.
The chief is right. Reality can be ugly. Capturing it on tape, unedited, for the world to see, redefines accountability. Sarasota made the wise decision to hire a full-time manager who is responsible for implementing and supervising the body-worn camera program. How does this impact you from a law enforcement community, what you're doing here tactically?
Well, basically, I have worn one today. This is the camera, and the officers wear it basically in this configuration on their uniform, and they go out and do their normal work that they've been doing and their normal professional police behavior. When they interact with individuals, go to calls for service or stop a car or stop an individual, they're able to just press on the camera, turn it on, and make a recording of that video. So if I'm just interacting with someone maybe for directions to the beach, I don't necessarily have to turn it on. But if it's a call for service or a car stop or a person stop, then I would activate it, turn it on, and make a recording of that interaction. And that's really the only difference. Everything else I would do, all my other training still is in play. At the end of the day, I simply come back to this station and I take my camera off, I port it into a dock, and all those videos that I've made during the day get stored in the cloud-based storage that we have.
It's interesting, you're out there, our officers are out there keeping the peace, putting lives on the line. So are there any circumstances that you can imagine that an officer would be justified turning their camera off? To me, this seems like an exercise in judgment.
You're right, it is a judgment call, and the way I taught it to everybody in the class and the way I explain it, we've all watched court TV. We've all seen two lawyers or the judge, and one of them asks for a sidebar. And they all get together in the corner, and the judge moves the mic away, and they have a private conversation about whatever legal or tactical issue they're going to discuss. And a lot of times the judge simply sends everybody back to the chairs, starts the court proceedings back up, and we don't know what that conversation was about. So that's the same thing with the officers. If I get a call from my supervisor and someone else is dealing with the suspect and victims, I can go off to a sidebar and have that private conversation with my supervisor to get him up to speed. In that instance, when I'm not having interaction with the citizens, the victims, the suspects, that's when I would deactivate my camera, have that private discussion, that sidebar, if you will. And then once I'm ready to talk back to anybody, talk back to the citizens or the victims or anyone, I would then reactivate my camera to engage back in conversation with them.
A year or two down the road, when you're here for another couple of years, as you move on, what do you think you will learn about law enforcement and from the practice of wearing these cameras, now that you are right in the middle of it?
This is just going to make us more professional. It's going to expose what we do at the Sarasota Police Department on a daily basis. All the good things the officer does, and yes, if an error is made, we will certainly address that error. We can correct it through training, correct it through whatever means need to be done to correct that behavior, and learn from it and grow as a department and as a police organization.
What are you going to do about going out and about in the community, showing these cameras off, telling people what is involved for large groups of people. How are you going to be doing that?
Well, we've already done a few presentations in the last few weeks, and we have other plans. We're going to 2 different farmers markets in June. We have community associations that I'm going to be presenting on Zoom for some of those that are still in Zoom status. And then in July, 1 or 2 of those are actually opening up to in-persons. So I'll be bringing a camera and maybe a uniformed officer with me, and we'll be demonstrating for the public in those forums also.
I think, speaking of community, a lot of people would want to look at and request to view the body cams. What's the process for that? Who can do it? Who can't?
So anyone can make a request through our website at SPD or through the City of Sarasota website. The request gets processed through my office, and we have to do that fine line of meeting the demands of the public and meeting the privacy demands of the public. So if you just want to watch a video of what happened at your neighbor's house, there's a potential for parts of that to be redacted so that the neighbors can have their privacy just the same way you can have your freedom of information. The first 30 minutes of video examination and redaction is kind of provided for free. And that gives us an estimate of how many videos we have, how long the time is, and then we can estimate based off of some of the content of each video what it might cost to redact that. If you're requesting video about yourself, I don't have to redact much about you for you, but if I'm requesting video about you, then I have to redact all kinds of privacy issues concerning you and your privacy. So the cost varies, and it's kind of a per hour charge. We send you a estimated bill. You put up half up front, we'll produce the video redacted for you, and then to finally collect that video, you pay the second half.
What's the cost?
It can vary anywhere between like $28 and $32 per hour.
Mr. Ferrante is a civilian employee for SPD, but his previous experience as a veteran police officer and body cam manager in Las Vegas is invaluable. One of the people who will be watching the policies and practices Mr. Ferrante is responsible for is well-known civil rights and sunshine law activist Michael Barfield. Welcome, Michael. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Suzanne, for having me.
Absolutely.
Glad to see you.
It's great to see you, too. You know, back in 2016, I was on the City Commission, and we were close to approving body cams. But we didn't, because one of the big concerns was the lawsuit that you filed. So what do you say about the notion that, ironically, while trying to defend civil rights, you delayed the implementation of body cams in Sarasota?
Well, I often get blamed for delaying the implementation of body cameras, but I've tried to explain that what I raised there was a question about access, the public's access to that technology, and the prohibitive cost of providing it. I believe the city wanted to charge $16,000 to get some simple body cameras or footage, and I thought that was unreasonable. It led to a lawsuit. The city attorney eventually agreed and said, well, we're just not ready to roll this out for prime time. The cost to the agency was just too prohibitive at the time. So I'm glad that the city has revisited the issue, and I hope that it has learned a valuable lesson from the inequity of passing the cost of body camera technology on to the citizens who want to review it.
Speaking of access, I interviewed the new SPD Body Cam manager. He said, depending on the situation, it could cost $32 an hour for a copy, which adds up quickly, and you have to pay half of that up front. So working class people can't afford hundreds of dollars. So does this mean that only rich people and lawyers will get copies?
Well, that's a big concern that I have. That's what led to the lawsuit that I filed several years ago, that you can't take this new technology, although it's not really new anymore, and try to pass the cost along to the public, because in Florida, we have a constitutional right to inspect government records, and a video from a police body camera is as much a public record as any other record at the police department. So that's concerning. That's a very high price for the average citizen to pay to be able to access records to find out what their government is up to. So, I mean, body cameras is a tool for police accountability. And, but as under that scenario, it won't be accessible by the public unless you're very wealthy or you go to court and fight them like I do. So I am concerned about the cost of that.
What other civil liberty concerns do you have?
Well, the biggest concern that I have is that body cameras would be used for widespread surveillance, and that there needs to be policies that are adopted to ensure that the technology is being effectively used at providing oversight, reducing police abuses, and increasing community trust. And without good policies, they risk becoming just another police surveillance device, and one with the real potential to invade privacy.
Tell me, what kind of situations do you expect will likely be first to prompt lawsuits?
Well, despite popular belief to the contrary, the ACLU doesn't threaten lawsuits. We will look at a policy, we will look at the effect of a policy, and we will make an informed judgment at that point. And there's an entire legal panel that reviews these cases to determine if we do file suit. But let me be clear, the ACLU believes in body cameras. We are a proponent of body cameras. We believe that they are an important and necessary tool to establish police accountability and improve trust within communities.
As Michael well knows, the unfair use of force by police on minorities is finally beginning to be recognized. And that is happening in part because scenes of police brutality have been captured by body cams and civilian cell phone recordings. Our final guest has been a part of that conversation for a long time and is very happy Sarasota is moving forward.
It's been a 7-year process. Even when you were on the commission, we were dealing with this, 7 years ago. But we're now here to where we're finally getting ready to see that long, hard work that we also advocated for 7 years ago finally come into implementation.
So why did it take so long? We know there are a lot of technical issues, whether it's cost, that was a big one. Why? Has the world changed and Sarasota's getting on board now?
Well, I think that is one. The world is changing. We know that when it first came up in Sarasota a number of years ago, privacy issues, cost issues, gatekeeper issues, who was going to, house all of, the footage, who was going to be able to see the footage, and all of that was some of the issues that came up 7 years ago. But I think now where we are in the year of 21, I think many law enforcement agencies across the country, and especially Sarasota, feels it's now time to really hold our law enforcement officers to a higher level of accountability. And one of the ways to do that is with body cameras. But the flip side of that, though, Suzanne, is it also holds the community accountable as well.
One of the items we talk about is access. It's not like anybody can just walk into the Sarasota Police Department and demand a copy of the tape. Depending on the situation, I think SPD will charge between $28 and $32 an hour to edit the tape. And you have to pay half in advance. What I'm concerned about, that could translate into several $100s really fast. Is that equitable to minorities?
Well, that's always, when you talk about public records requests, which body cameras are going to fall into that same category, that's always a concern, especially from organizations like ours that are advocating and are doing independent, investigations. Sometimes when we're requesting, these records or these footages, it can be very, very costly, especially depending on the volumes of information, that you are requesting. I'm hoping that our agencies will work with the individuals who will put in requests, for this footage,
Right.
based on, I guess based on the dynamics. I mean, if it's an organization like ours, the ACLU, the NAACP, some of these organizations that are grassroots organizations that are involved in these investigations, that they will work with us as far as the cost factor is concerned. So it's going to be one of those things that we're going to have to deal with it when we cross that bridge.
All right. When you look, as I'm sure you do, the national tide of race relations and call for police reform, what advice would you give Chief Reeser and all his officers as this historic change occurs here in our community?
The advice that I would give Chief and his cabinet and all of his officers is to really make sure that they pay attention to what's happening around the country, and make sure that Sarasota doesn't fall or be one of those agencies that's now plastered all over the news. We know that we've had a few little incidents here,
Yes.
in Sarasota, and thank God they are nowhere near the level of what we've seen in Minneapolis and other parts of the country. But that could be us, though. So as a result of that, when I have my conversations with Chief, because we meet on a weekly basis, is just making sure that you keep your eyes and ears in tune to what's happening in the country, and make sure that we don't make some of the same mistakes that we see some of these other law enforcement agencies are going through, and be a part of the community.
I'm certain Trevor would agree. We need to do this properly. The stakes are high. When you carry a gun, getting it right most of the time is not enough. The possibility of catching and correcting bad calls on the field of life, like instant replay in sports, it's a game changer. But this is just a tool, not a guarantee. The ultimate measure will be culture change. And that, my friends, will take more than cameras and videotape. For more information on body cams, visit these links. And you can always see this episode and all our previous episodes on my Facebook, YouTube, and website. Well, that wraps up another one. Hope you learned something and enjoyed the show. Until next time, I'm Suzanne Atwell. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you around town.